Hello everyone, I'm Sleipnir17 and today I'm going to do something a bit different. You see, in my videos I usually explain how to perform various glitches, showing the steps required in order to get certain results, but this tutorial format doesn't really leave much space to a deeper analysis. I've never had the chance to explain, for example, how and why certain actions cause certain consequences in the game. I think though that this different aspect of glitches is quite interesting to look into. This is what I want to examine in this video and possibly in some future ones as well. The topic of today's episode is a relatively old and little known glitch called Battle Pike Glitch. I've not found any video or document explaining how this glitch actually works, so I'll do one myself. The explanation of this glitch is pretty simple, so I think this is a good way to start. Enough with the introduction, let's get into the interesting stuff. The so-called Battle Pike Glitch is a technique used to give the move Sketch to Pokémon that are not supposed to learn it. If you know what Sketch does, you'll immediately see how useful this is. Sketch allows the Pokémon that uses it to permanently copy any existing move, with very few exceptions. This means that if a Pokémon knows Sketch, it can learn basically any move. The only Pokémon that can legally learn Sketch is Smeargle, whose stats are obnoxious enough to greatly nerf this otherwise overpowered move. But thanks to this glitch, this limitation no longer exists. Now, you might say that, as for today, there are other, better ways to teach any move to any Pokémon with no exception at all, and you'd be right. You must consider though that this glitch was discovered well before the new arbitrary code execution setup by MERP was introduced. At the time, this was a really powerful glitch, and I'm surprised of how little attention it has gotten. This glitch was found by TeruTeruSky pretty much by accident while performing a double battle glitch for a video. I leave a link to their video in the description, go check it out, it really deserves more than what it got. This is one of the few Emerald glitches that does not originate from Pokémon Glitch, so let's see how the original setup looks like. The Battle Pike is one of the 7 facilities in Hoenn Battle Frontier. Here the player starts in a room where 3 different paths are available. Without knowing what's behind the curtains, the challenger is forced to choose one path, entering one of a variety of possible rooms where different hazards might threaten him. A guide will help the player by giving a hint on what's behind one of the 3 entrances. There are multiple possible hints, each one referring to 2 possible outcomes. For example, if the guide says, "It seems to have the distinct aroma of Pokémon wafting around it," then the path can either lead to a trainer battle that will heal the party after winning, or to a room where wild Pokémon can be encountered. After successfully completing the challenge room, 3 new paths will open up and the challenge will continue. To understand why the setup I'm going to show works, we have to first give a look at how Battle Pike rooms are generated. The 2 rooms not mentioned by the guide are randomly generated upon entering. I'm demonstrating this on screen by entering the same room multiple times, making use of a save state. As you can see, the result is different each time, meaning that the room is actually being generated when the player walks through the entrance. The room mentioned by the guide though cannot be random since it has to match the given hint. To do so, the game generates the room beforehand, specifically when entering the 3 paths room. As you can see on screen, by doing exactly what I did before but this time on a hinted room, I always get the same result, meaning that the room has already been generated. There is one limitation in both types of generation. If the player only has 1 healthy Pokémon at the moment when the room is generated, then the outcome will never be the double battle room. Now comes the clever trick. Let's say the player has 1 KO Pokémon, 1 healthy Pokémon and a poisoned one when entering the 3 paths room. At that point the hinted room is generated. Since there are 2 healthy Pokémon, the restriction is not applied. The player can then cause the poisoned Pokémon to faint by making enough steps. Now the restriction is going to be applied to the random rooms, but the hinted one has already been generated. If that room happens to be the double battle one, then the player will have the possibility to enter a double battle with only 1 Pokémon, which is something the game doesn't really like. This is the beginning of the double battle glitch. At this point several glitchy behaviors can be triggered, but I'll not go into detail. You can check TeruTeruSky's video for that. In this video I'm only going to focus on the Battle Pike glitch itself and on the setup needed for it to work. First of all, the game will send the healthy Pokémon, then, unable to find another healthy Pokémon, will simply send the first party Pokémon. This means that, if the healthy Pokémon is also the first party one, then the player will send the same Pokémon twice. At this point, by opening and closing the Pokémon menu, the 2 identical Pokémon will become invisible. The glitch ends after finishing the double battle, either by winning or losing. The result is quite surprising. The first party Pokémon will be replaced with the second one, and all moves that were not shared between the first and second party Pokémon will be replaced with the move Sketch. This effect is permanent, it will not reset after ending the Battle Pike challenge. The result sure is unexpected and confusing, and the weirdness related to the double battle glitch only makes things worse. With the introduction of arbitrary code execution, I wanted to use that new, extremely powerful glitch to make a simpler setup that has no luck involved and no limitation on Pokémon species, since the original setup only works on Pokémon that can participate to the Battle Pike challenge. The setup I developed, which I called Enhanced Battle Pike Glitch, can be found in the description of this video. It's really linear, so let's analyze it to maybe understand what is happening a little bit better. The new setup is really simple. Save the game while having the target Pokémon whose moves must be modified, and the glitch Pokémon needed for arbitrary code execution in your party. Then switch the target Pokémon and the glitch Pokémon and, without saving, execute the code. I'm not going to explain what arbitrary code execution is or how it works. All you need to know here is that executing the code in this case simply means teleporting inside of the Battle Pike. If the teleportation was achieved with a cheat code instead of arbitrary code execution, the result would have been the same. After the teleportation, the glitch is over. The target Pokémon already has its moves replaced with Sketch. As a side note, the glitch Pokémon also has its move replaced with Sketch. This is not that important by a practical point of view, but this may help you figuring out how the glitch works. Also, if a move is shared between the target Pokémon and the glitch Pokémon, that move will not become Sketch, something similar to what happens with the original setup. Now with all the setups out of the way, let me explain you what is going on. The cornerstone of this glitch is an intended mechanic involving the use of Sketch in Battle Frontier facilities. The game doesn't want the player to sketch moves from Battle Frontier Pokémon. I guess that's because Battle Frontier gives access to rare moves that would otherwise require mechanics such as trading to get, but that's besides the point. What really matters is that the game makes so that the effect of Sketch is temporary when used in Battle Frontier challenges. The way in which it does it here is peculiar, yet pretty efficient. After certain transitions such as ending a battle, the game checks for each party slot if the current moves are the same moves registered at the beginning of the challenge, when the game is mandatorily saved. If that's not the case, the game deduces that the move Sketch must have been used, since Sketch is the only thing that can cause a move to change while in a Battle Frontier challenge, and thus proceeds to replace the move with the check is not verified with Sketch. Now let's apply these to the Enhanced Battle Pike Glitch procedure. The procedure first requires to save the game while having the target Pokémon and the glitch Pokémon in your team, let's say in slot 1 and 2 for convenience. The initial moves are set in this moment, since the game is not going to be saved again until the glitch is completed. At this point, the target Pokémon and the glitch Pokémon are swapped, operation that is not allowed while in a Battle Pike challenge. Now arbitrary code execution is performed and the player is teleported inside the Battle Pike. At this point, the game makes the moves check. The problem is, the moves in slot 1 are different from the initial moves because slot 1 now contains a different Pokémon. The check is not verified on any of the moves, thus all moves are replaced with Sketch. Slot 2 also contains a different Pokémon, so this applies there as well. If the move is shared between the two Pokémon though, the check on that move will be verified, thus that move will remain untouched. To be precise, the check doesn't care for the order of the moves because the player is allowed to swap them around during the challenge. At this point you may also have realized how there's nothing specific about the Battle Pike making the glitch possible. In fact, if you teleport inside the Battle Palace, Battle Tower or Battle Arena, the effect will be the same. This explains entirely how the Enhanced Battle Pike Glitch works. Now let's move on to the more intricate original setup. Well, now that you know where to look at, you realize how there's not really anything new to understand. Since the first Pokémon is being replaced by the second Pokémon, the 4 moves of the Pokémon in slot 1 will not match the initial moves, thus the moves check will fail on all non-shared moves, turning them into Sketch. This does not apply to the second party Pokémon, since this time that one is not changing anything. Much harder task would be understanding why the game replaces the first Pokémon with the second one while the double battle glitch is active, but that's a different story. I think it's enough for today's video. If you enjoy this type of content, please let me know in the comments. I have other topics I could address in future videos. That's it for now. Have a good day.